Historical development of women's movement. By far, you know, and you are very aware of the fact that women's movement took place in various stages. Today, women have progressed and developed in a number of domains. No matter whether it is education, profession, or any other skill, we have seen women excelling and progressing by leaps and bounds. But we have to see that what movements, what steps, and what type of struggles took place before we reached to this level. Let's have a look at some of the milestone events that led to this women empowerment that we experience and see today. First of all, we see that Christine de Pizan, generally considered the first feminist writer, wrote in the 14th and the 15th century and was known as the first full-time female writer. In the 17th and 18th century, women propagated the significance of women's education. Many other women took part in this struggle. We see that for women's right to education and higher education led to very significant consequences later on. It led to women's development in various domains and various spheres of life. We see that the very first significant event took place in 1785 when the first scientific society for women was established in the Dutch Republic. At the same time, people saw that women started writing in science journals and their writings were being valued and they were being appreciated by people who were scientists and non-scientists also. During the French Revolution, some significant documents were produced, and these documents presented sort of landmarks and blueprints for other documents on the similar grounds. In 1791, Declaration of the Rights of Women and the Female Citizen was developed. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen were paraphrased. The document was made in 1789. It was the French Revolution's central document. All these events laid the foundation for women's suffrage movement. In 1792, Mary Wollstonecraft wrote the famous A Vindication of the Rights of Women. She called for full women participation for the rights and duties of citizenship. She said that women were fragile and they were considered to be dependent upon men because of the way society had been set up. यानी उनके कहने का मकसद ये था कि औरतें जो हैं उनको नाजुक समझा जाता है और माशरा इस तरह से तरतीब दिया गया है और इस तरह के काम माशरे में हो रहे होते हैं जिनके लिए समझा जाता है कि औरतें अपनी नज़ाकत की वजह से उसमें शामिल नहीं हो पाती या नहीं हो सकती, जिसकी वजह से वो मर्दों पर इन्हिसार करती हैं। जबकि होना ये चाहिए कि उनको अपनी काबिलियत का एहसास होना चाहिए और उन्हें अपने हुकूक का और अपनी जिम्मेदारी का एहसास होना चाहिए और उन्हें एक एक्टिव सिटीजन के तौर पर अपना किरदार अदा करना चाहिए। She advocated equality of education and opportunity between men and women. She believed and she propagated that women should have access to education and they should have the same access to resources just like men had. The modern feminist movement emerged from the West, basically. We see that most early thinkers and philosophers belong to the Western countries who were talking about women's rights. But at the same time, we also realize that in the East also, women's rights were being talked about in a different manner. In many Eastern societies, Oriental societies, women had the same rights as men. In some societies, women were respected more as compared to other societies. But definitely, a change was required. The modern feminist movement, although it emerged from the West, but it spread all over the world very soon. In this struggle, women were not alone. Women's movement was not led by women alone. They had support from men who had a feminist orientation, who supported women's rights, and who wanted to see women as empowered and emancipated citizens of the society. The focus of this earlier struggle was basically on the political, economic, and social spheres. We know that the very first steps were towards the right to education and higher education. And later on, they went for professional education and skill also. And then the struggle was about women's participation in the political arena, in the economic sphere, and the social setup. All societies were perceived to be patriarchal and male-dominated societies, which meant that the man was the head of the family, therefore he was the head of the organizations, head of the tribe, and he was supposed to be capable enough to head any organization. Women, on the other hand, were not considered to be that capable and that qualified that they would be offered a leading position, a leadership role. Women were suppressed at home, oppressed at home, and they were also oppressed in the society. This was the main perception. Women were denied the right to vote, to being educated citizens, and to be professionals. They were treated as second-rate citizens who had less ability, less intellect as compared to the male counterparts. And since they were supposed to be and perceived to be less capable and second-rate citizens who had lower level of intellect, therefore they were not trusted to be given responsibility-oriented jobs that required a person who was alert, who was responsible, who was honest. जिसका मतलब ये है कि औरतों के लिए शुरू में तो तालीम के दरवाजे बंद थे और जब तालीम के दरवाजे खुल भी गए तो ये समझा गया कि शायद वो इतनी काबिल नहीं है कि उनको ऐसे ओहदे दिए जा सकें किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में जिसके लिए एक बहुत तवाना जहन की, एक बहुत ज़्यादा जिम्मेदार इंसान की ज़रूरत हो, क्योंकि समझा यही जाता था कि औरतें फ्रेजाइल हैं, नाजुक हैं और थोड़ी सी कम अकल हैं. 19th century reform movement was a landmark in the history of women liberation. A number of events took place which speeded up the process of women liberation and empowerment. In 1848, New York, the first women's rights convention took place. The famous book written by J.S. Mill, the famous thinker, was The Subjection of Women's Rights, The Subjection of Women, which was written in the mid-1800s. He was supported by, and he was working closely with his wife, Harriet Tyler. Then we think of and we know that a famous name was that of Emmeline Pankhurst, who formed WSPU, the famous Women's Social and Political Union. She was one of the most prominent founders of women suffragist movement. In 1903, Pankhurst and her daughters founded the Women's Social and Political Union with the motto, Votes for Women. That was just a triggering event. She struggled for exposing the institutional sexism in the British society, and her work became very popular within very limited time. A reform movement for attaining the goal of suffrage movement, that was called the suffrage movement, was becoming very popular among women because women wanted to participate in the political process. There was a growing awareness in women that they were equally capable citizens. And if they went for education, they could excel in education. And if they were allowed to go for profession, they would excel as doctors and surgeons and teachers and professors and nurses and psychiatrists. The movement had political and social aims, of course. First of all, political participation, which meant that they will have a role in political decision-making that involved women's status in the society. Suffragists were the people who were the supporters and leaders of the suffrage movement. And suffragettes were the female supporters of the movement. So we can see that this movement was also not led by women alone. They had many male supporters also. In 1776, a major event took place. In New Jersey, the USA, first women's suffrage took place, and now people were called people and not men. So, if you remember, we used to call ourselves or the humankind, mankind. So they were not talking about just men and man alone, they were talking about people and citizens. In 1838, the Pitcairn Island gave the right of suffrage or franchise to their women. 1861, South Australia gave this right, restricted though to the women. 1871, the Paris Commune allowed the right, that was later cancelled, but later on, President de Gaulle in 1944 reinstated the right. 1893, New Zealand. 1894, South Australia. 1906, Finland. Women in these countries finally attained the right to vote. In 1907, another landmark event took place when in Finland they had world's first woman parliamentarian. The first female member of the parliament was in Finland. Finland later on had 19 members of parliament after the election. And so on, the developments kept taking place. In 1913, Norway and Denmark. 1917, Soviet Union and Canada, they gave the rights to women. Quebec permitted suffrage in 1940. In 1918, all German and Polish women and British women above 30 years of age, they were given the right to vote. In 1920, remaining American states followed. 1928, all British women were granted suffrage. In 1926, women's suffrage took place in Turkey. By 1984, almost everywhere women were given this right. We see that women in Pakistan had this right even in 1947 when the country became independent. So therefore, we are very lucky that women in our country had the right to participate in the political process very early. When this country came into existence, came into being, the women were given the same rights, same political rights as they were given to men. And today we know that every citizen, whether it's a man or a woman at the age of 18, is considered to be an adult citizen and has a right to vote. And we have seen that this right and this empowerment and this emancipation that we enjoy has at its background a struggle of years, of decades, and actually even centuries.